Some 200 miles from the DuSable gravesite, deep in a national forest in southern Illinois, another search for the truth about African American history is underway. It's a part of that history that has not yet been told.
What is this?
Of Black Americans building free and prosperous towns in the time of slavery.
It's a rim of a plate or like a tea saucer, something like that.
The story will be compiled with the help of local school children from broken pieces of glass, metal, ceramic, all evidence of a life here 150 years ago, when houses stood on this soil and this forest was a farm. The ground the children search is part of the Shawnee National Forest. They're participating in a U.S. Forest Service program with government archaeologists.
It looks like a ride. Ride to something.
It does look like a barrel hoop, guys.
Their project is to excavate a 19th century farming community that was created and run by African Americans 20 years before the Civil War. Today, they're working on the home of Bedford Miller, one of the first residents of what became known as Miller Grove.
What's standing behind me basically is the house. I'm in one side of the house. What we have over there is one corner at the corner of the excavations where the tarp is. Right behind me, immediately behind me, is the other corner, and of course that's the wall.
It was 1846, 28 years after DuSable died, when Bedford Miller came to Illinois with his family. In many states, slavery was still the backbone of the economy, but the movement to abolish it was gaining strength. In Tennessee, the Miller family was given its freedom, but freed slaves were not allowed to stay in the state, so they came to Pope County, Illinois, and were eventually joined by other African American families.
The bulk of the population of Southern Illinois is not familiar with the African American heritage of the area. They've been here as long as the states have been here, not necessarily as slaves. They came here largely as free people.
He was 70 years old.
For children who grew up believing that, for the most part, their ancestors lived and died as slaves, it is exciting to learn of African Americans who created their own autonomous community. And Miller Grove is just one of many communities throughout the country that were founded, built and run by African Americans even while slavery was still the law of the land. Sundiata, Keita, Cha-Jua at the University of Illinois has researched such communities across the country.
In the era of slavery, blacks are founding towns. They're building businesses. They're building political parties. They're engaged in a range of life. They're creating literary societies in the towns that they govern. They're building, and I mean building as in cutting the trees, hewing the stone, as well as managing, right? That demonstrates a level of capacity that the broader society says blacks are not capable of.
At the time the Millers came to Pope County, Illinois was a free state surrounded by slave states, but it was still hostile territory for African Americans. Laws known as black codes had been enacted that made certain that freed slaves had very few rights.
In a place like Illinois, free blacks are not allowed to sit on juries. They must pay property taxes, but their children are not allowed to go to public schools. So they are basically outside the law, excluded from the normal legal process, and subject to a set of additional and very punitive laws.
Given the restrictions on their lives, it's easy to understand why the people of Miller Grove wanted to establish an isolated, segregated community, and why they would have needed their own school. Records show that, in fact, there was a school here, but where was the building? The answer may lie in the old-bound books of the county courthouse.
Oh, there's a cemetery. Okay. So, according to the records, the school would have been...
In accordance with the deed,
Okay.
it is in the southeast corner, being 10 rods east and west by 8 rods north and south.
So that would be it.
That's very possible.
Cool.
Yeah.
The existence of a school in rural Illinois may seem insignificant, but it reflects the accomplishments of people who have been given little recognition in American history, and that makes it extremely important.
And we're finally taking time to look at history from the ground up and looking at just the everyday ordinary people and what they did, how they lived, what they contributed is just a fantastic part of our history that we need to know about.
Miller Grove existed as a community for more than 80 years, well into the 20th century. But eventually, life in a remote corner of southern Illinois became too hard.
By the time of the Depression, a lot of people couldn't pay back taxes, so they were going to be losing their property, and that was when the Shawnee National Forest was created and people started selling out.
Miller Grove didn't grow into an enormous city like Chicago, and therefore, unlike DuSable, Bedford Miller will not have a high school or museum named in his honor. But his story and those of other free African Americans who created their own communities are now being discovered and may finally find their place in history.
We have a range of these communities, yet if you pick up a standard U.S. history textbook, they don't appear. None of them. Now, that's very curious, because if you're looking for places where African Americans were able to demonstrate their capacities, it's often going to be in these communities.
The movement today to write an accurate history of African Americans is spreading. And at DuSable's grave in Missouri, work is progressing steadily. Stay with us for more on In Search of DuSable.